We're optimizing our creative talent. Hope there are no hard feelings. You understand how modern artistry works. My name's Arthur Finch. I'm 62 years old, and I've spent 29 years making heritage woodworks renowned for its bespoke furniture. 29 years of arriving at 6 o'clock in the morning, perfecting antique finishes, mentoring every new apprentice who walked through those doors. I never missed a day. Never complained when they asked me to work weekends. Never said no when they needed someone to stay late and ensure a delicate piece cured just right overnight. 3 weeks. That's all I had left before my full legacy bonus, a unique payout for 30 years of continuous service, kicked in. 3 weeks before I could walk out of there with my head held high and my future secure. 29 years and 9 months of dedication, and Chloe Sterling just told me I was obsolete. She didn't even look at me when she said it, just stared at her tablet screen like I was some outdated tool she was discarding. The design studio felt colder than usual. The hushed whispers of the younger designers in the background, unaware that the master artisan who taught them how to identify grain patterns and achieve an authentic patina was being shown the door. Market trends, Chloe continued, finally glancing up. We're moving in a more digitally focused direction. Nothing personal, Arthur, just business. I nodded. What else was I supposed to do? Argue? Beg? I'd seen other artisans, their hands gnarled from years of work, escorted out by security for making a scene. That wasn't going to be me. The termination paperwork was already printed and waiting in a sleek black folder. Standard stuff: final paycheck calculations, insurance information, return of company tools. I signed where they told me to sign. Dated everything with the same fountain pen I'd used for the past decade, the one with the subtle Heritage Woodworks crest that was starting to wear thin. Workshop keys and your access fob, Chloe said, holding out her hand. I unclipped the fob from my belt, the same spot it had lived for nearly 3 decades. The plastic was worn smooth from years of scanning through workshop doors. My employee photo looked younger, taken back when my beard was less gray, and I thought I'd retire from this place with dignity. The keys felt heavier than they should have. Master keys to every workshop, keys to the rare wood storage, the finishing labs. I'd been trusted with everything. I placed them in Chloe's palm without a word, picked up my copy of the paperwork, and walked out past the design stations where people were already looking away, past the break room where I'd eaten lunch at the same worn table for 29 years, past the reception desk where I'd checked in thousands of times. The parking lot was quiet. My old pickup truck started on the first try, same as always. I sat there for a minute, engine running, looking back at the building. Something felt off about the whole thing, but I couldn't put my finger on what. I built my life around that place. Started there when I was 33, fresh off a divorce that took half of everything I owned. The job wasn't glamorous. Bespoke finishing meant I was the guy who meticulously sanded and stained and polished. But it was steady work with good benefits, and they promised me that if I stuck around, they'd take care of me when I got old. Heritage Woodworks wasn't much back then. Maybe 40 employees, one large workshop, still trying to figure out what kind of premium furniture company they wanted to be. I watched them grow, helped them expand into 3 specialized workshops across the artisan district. When they needed someone to oversee the integration of new finishing technologies, they asked me. When the quality assurance inspectors came around asking questions about durability standards, they sent me to deal with them. I trained every finishing apprentice who came after me, showed them how to read the grain, how to mix custom dyes, how to preserve the integrity of the wood without breaking the budget. Most of them moved on to open their own studios eventually. I stayed. This was my place. My wife passed away 7 years ago, an unexpected illness. The company health insurance covered most of the treatments, and Chloe's predecessor let me take all the time I needed for doctor appointments and hospital stays. When she died, half the office came to the funeral. They were good people, good company. Chloe was different when she took over 2 years ago. Younger, an MBA from some prestigious business school. She looked at everything like it was a problem that needed solving, including the people who'd been there since before she was born. Started bringing in consultants to optimize operational efficiency. Started talking about right-sizing the workforce. The signs were there, if I'd wanted to see them. Chloe stopped saying hello when she passed me in the hallway. Stopped including me in the monthly production meetings. When I submitted my material requisitions, they came back with questions I'd never had to answer before. Why did we need so many artisanal pigments? Could we get by with fewer specialized hand tools? Wasn't I getting a little old to be working on scaffolding and crawling around under heavy machinery? I figured she was just trying to assert herself as the new boss, show everyone she was making changes. I'd seen it before with other managers. They come in, make some noise, then settle into the routine once they realize how things actually work. But there were other things too. Conversations that stopped when I walked into a room, meetings I wasn't invited to anymore, a new apprentice in finishing who asked me questions about my job responsibilities. Things he shouldn't have needed to know unless someone was planning to have him take over. I should have paid more attention, should have asked more questions, but I was 3 weeks away from my legacy bonus vesting, and all I could think about was making it to the finish line. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the termination paperwork spread out in front of me. The numbers didn't add up the way they should have. According to my calculations, I had 29 years and 9 months of service. According to their paperwork, I had 29 years and 8 months, 1 month short of the 30-year mark needed for the full legacy bonus. I pulled out my old artisan's guide, the one from 10 years ago when they formalized the legacy bonus policy. It was clear as day, 30 years of continuous service for the full bonus. I was 62 with 29 years and 9 months. 3 more weeks, and I would have hit the 30-year mark. Then I remembered the company-wide memo Chloe had sent out just last month. I'd kept a copy because it seemed important. Updates to the artisan's guide, clarifications about long-term incentives, assurance that the company was committed to honoring all existing agreements. I found it in my filing cabinet, right where I'd left it. Effective immediately, all service calculations for long-term incentives will be based on continuous years of service as defined in the current Artisan's Guide. Employees approaching eligibility should review their service records to ensure accuracy. I read it 3 times. Then I got out my calculator and started going through my pay stubs, every single one, going back 10 years. Overtime, vacation days, special project hours, everything was documented. Everything matched up to 29 years and 9 months of service as of this Friday. They'd miscalculated on purpose, or maybe they just hoped I wouldn't notice. I thought about calling Chloe, demanding they fix the paperwork, but what was the point? She'd already made it clear that I was done. Calling her would just give her a chance to come up with another excuse, another reason why the rules didn't apply to my situation. I thought about getting a lawyer, but lawyers cost money I didn't have, and fighting a big company with deep pockets was a young man's game. Then I remembered Eleanor Vance. She'd worked in accounting at Heritage Woodworks for 10 years before leaving last year, citing ethical concerns with the new management. Sharp woman, always played by the book, never let the company cut corners when it came to employee contracts. I'd heard through the grapevine that she was doing independent financial consulting now, helping small businesses avoid the kind of legal problems that came from shady accounting. I found her number in my old contacts and stared at it for a long time. Making that call would mean admitting that I'd been screwed over. It would mean fighting back instead of just accepting what had happened and moving on. But sitting there in my kitchen, looking at 29 years of pay stubs and a termination letter that didn't match the facts, I realized something had shifted inside me. I wasn't angry. I was focused. I picked up the phone and dialed. Eleanor answered on the second ring. Her voice was the same as I remembered. Direct. No nonsense. The kind of tone that made you want to tell her the truth whether you planned to or not. "Arthur Finch?" she said before I could introduce myself. I heard about what happened. Word travels fast in this industry. I laid out everything for her. The timing of my termination, the discrepancy in the service calculation, Chloe's attitude over the past few months. She listened without interrupting, asking pointed questions about dates and documentation. When I finished, there was a long pause. "You kept all your pay stubs?" she asked. "Every company memo, policy update, everything important. My wife always told me to keep good records." Smart woman, Arthur. I need you to listen carefully. What Chloe did isn't just wrong, it's illegal. Federal law protects employees from being terminated to prevent them from collecting earned benefits, but proving it requires more than just the timing. We need to show intent. She explained how these cases worked. The Employee Benefits Enforcement Agency, EBEA, took them seriously, but they needed solid evidence, documentation, a pattern of behavior, something that showed the termination wasn't just bad timing, but deliberate fraud. "Bring everything to my office Monday morning," she said. "Don't talk to anyone at Heritage. Don't post anything on social media. Don't even tell your neighbors what happened. If this goes where I think it's going, we want them to believe they got away with it." Monday morning, I drove to Eleanor's office with 3 boxes of paperwork. Pay stubs, artisan's guides, memos, performance reviews, email printouts, 29 years of documentation organized in chronological order. She went through everything methodically, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When she got to Chloe's memo from last month, she stopped and read it twice. "This is golden," she said. She put it in writing that service calculations should be accurate. Then she fires you with an inaccurate calculation 3 weeks before you hit 30 years. Either she's incompetent or she's lying. What's the difference? Incompetence gets you your job back. Lying gets you your job back plus damages, plus a federal investigation that could shut down their entire finance department. She explained the process. File a complaint with the EBEA. They'd investigate, interview witnesses, review documents. If they found evidence of deliberate benefit denial, Heritage Woodworks would face serious penalties. Not just fines, potential criminal charges for the people involved. "How long does it take?" I asked. "Depends. Could be weeks, could be months. But Arthur, you need to understand something. Once we file this complaint, there's no going back. Chloe's going to know you didn't just walk away quietly. She's going to fight back." She was right about that part. Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. Chloe's name on the caller ID. "Arthur, I heard you've been talking to people about your termination. I hope you're not planning to do anything stupid." I didn't say anything. "Look, I get it. You're upset. But we followed company policy to the letter. Your service record shows 29 years and 8 months. I've got the documentation right here." "What documentation?" "Your hiring date, April 10th, 1995. Your termination date, March 20th, 2024. Simple math, Arthur." I knew she was lying. I started at Heritage on April 10th, 1994. I had the original offer letter to prove it. But Chloe was setting up her defense, trying to get me to argue with her over the phone where she could control the conversation. "I'm not looking for trouble," I said. "Good. That's good to hear. Because if someone were to file a frivolous complaint against the company, well, we'd have to defend ourselves. And defending ourselves might involve looking very closely at that person's work history. Making sure they never violated any company policies, never took anything that didn't belong to them, never said anything that might have hurt the company's reputation. The threat was clear. Fight back, and they'd destroy whatever was left of my reputation." "I understand," I said, and hung up. But I didn't understand. Not really. Because what Chloe didn't know was that Eleanor had already filed the complaint that morning. Eleanor called me Wednesday evening with news that changed everything. "The EBEA moved fast on this one," she said. "They've been watching Heritage for a while. Turns out, you're not the first person this happened to." She'd spoken with the investigator assigned to my case. Over the past 2 years, 2 other longtime artisans at Heritage had been terminated within months of becoming eligible for similar legacy benefits. All of them in their 60s, all of them with service records that had been mysteriously miscalculated. They're calling it a pattern, Eleanor explained. Systematic benefit denial, the kind of thing that gets companies put on federal watch lists. But there was more. The investigator had requested personnel files for all 3 terminated employees. What they found was a series of emails between Chloe and the new finance director discussing ways to optimize the workforce and reduce long-term benefit obligations. They weren't even smart about it, Eleanor said. Used company email, talked about specific employees by name. Your name was mentioned 4 times in the past 2 months. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What did they say about me? That you were a legacy cost, that your potential bonus and specialized tool allowance would represent a significant ongoing expense, that your position could be eliminated and your responsibilities distributed among existing staff. They'd been planning this for months while I was coming in early and staying late, while I was mentoring new people and perfecting their pieces. They were figuring out how to get rid of me without paying what they owed. There's something else, Eleanor continued. The investigator wants to interview you Thursday morning. They're bringing someone from the criminal division. Criminal, Arthur. When a company deliberately terminates employees to avoid paying earned benefits, that's not just a civil matter, that's fraud. Wire fraud if they used electronic communications to plan it. The people involved can go to prison. Thursday morning, I sat in a conference room at the EBEA building downtown. 2 investigators, both younger than my son, both wearing suits that cost more than I spent on clothes in a year. They recorded everything, asked me to walk through my employment history year by year, showed me printouts of emails I'd never seen. The emails were worse than Eleanor had described. Chloe and the finance director hadn't just discussed terminating me. They discussed terminating anyone who was close to legacy bonus eligibility. They called it proactive talent management. They had a spreadsheet with names and dates and projected savings. Mr. Finch, one of the investigators said, based on what we've seen, we believe Heritage Woodworks engaged in a deliberate scheme to defraud multiple employees of earned benefits. Your case is just the most recent example. They showed me documents I'd never seen before. Internal company communications about the cost of maintaining older, highly skilled artisans. Memos about renegotiating long-term incentive obligations. A presentation to the board of directors that included a slide titled Legacy Employee Transition Strategy. My name was on that slide, along with the names of the 2 other employees who'd been terminated. We were all listed under Q2 optimization targets. We're going to need you to testify, the other investigator said. This is going to trial federal court. The people responsible are going to be held accountable. I thought about Chloe sitting in that design studio, telling me it was just business, nothing personal. I thought about 29 years of getting up before sunrise, of perfecting intricate pieces, of believing that loyalty would be rewarded. What do you need me to do? The federal investigation moved faster than anyone expected. By the following Monday, investigators had seized Heritage Woodworks' email servers and interviewed 5 current employees. By Wednesday, they'd executed a search warrant on Chloe's office and the finance department. Eleanor kept me updated on everything the investigators had found, more evidence than they knew what to do with. Internal documents dating back 2 years showing a systematic plan to eliminate older employees. Spreadsheets calculating bonus savings. Email threads discussing the best timing for terminations to avoid legal challenges. They kept records of everything, Eleanor told me over coffee Thursday morning. It's like they wanted to get caught. The plan was simple and brutal. Identify employees approaching benefit eligibility, find reasons to question their performance or necessity, terminate them just before their benefits vested, save millions in long-term costs. Chloe had presented it to the board as a financial necessity. The company was growing, but legacy bonuses were eating into profits. Younger employees cost less to train and didn't require long-term incentive commitments. It was basic business math. What she hadn't counted on was someone like me keeping detailed records, or someone like Eleanor understanding federal employment law, or investigators who took benefit fraud seriously. Friday afternoon, Chloe called me again. This time her voice was different, higher-pitched, nervous. "Arthur, I think there's been a misunderstanding about your termination. We should talk, work something out." "What kind of misunderstanding?" "Your service record. We may have made an error in the calculation. If you'd be willing to come in Monday morning, we could review everything. Make sure you get what you deserve." She was panicking. The investigation was public now, mentioned in the business section of the local Artisan Gazette. Heritage Woodworks' stock price had dropped 10% in 2 days. The board was asking questions Chloe couldn't answer. "I don't think that's necessary," I said. "Arthur, please. We've worked together for years. Let's handle this professionally. No lawyers, no government agencies, just two reasonable people working out a disagreement." But it was too late for reasonable. The EBEA had already filed charges, criminal charges, not just civil ones. Chloe was facing up to 3 years in federal prison for wire fraud and conspiracy to defraud employees of earned benefits. Monday morning, I got a call from the company's senior legal counsel, not Chloe, the actual company lawyer, the one they brought in when things got serious. "Mr. Finch, my client would like to discuss a settlement. Full reinstatement of your legacy bonus, specialized tool allowance, and additional compensation for the inconvenience you've experienced." "How much additional compensation?" "We're prepared to offer $40,000, provided you agree not to pursue further legal action." I told him I'd think about it. Then I called Eleanor. "Don't take it," she said immediately. "Arthur, they're scared. The criminal charges are just the beginning. Once this hits federal court, other employees are going to come forward. This is going to be a class action lawsuit worth millions." She was right. By Tuesday, the EBEA had been contacted by 6 more current and former Heritage Woodworks employees who suspected their terminations or benefit calculations were fraudulent. By Thursday, it was 12. The local news picked up the story. Federal investigation targets local artisan company. Chloe's photo was on the front page of the business section, looking uncomfortable in a suit that suddenly seemed too formal for her. I didn't have to do anything but wait. The system was working exactly the way it was supposed to work, and Chloe was about to learn what it felt like to have your future decided by someone else. Tuesday morning, I was drinking coffee and reading the newspaper when my phone rang. Eleanor, calling earlier than usual. "Turn on Channel 8, she said. "Now." I found the remote and switched to the local news. Chloe Sterling was being led out of the Heritage Woodworks building in handcuffs, federal agents carrying boxes of documents behind her. The reporter was talking about wire fraud charges and conspiracy to defraud employees of earned benefits. Federal prosecutors alleged that Sterling and Finance Director Marcus Thorne engaged in a systematic scheme to terminate longtime employees just before they became eligible for full legacy benefits, the reporter said. The alleged fraud cost affected employees hundreds of thousands of dollars in earned benefits. The camera showed Chloe stumbling slightly as the agents helped her into a federal marshal's vehicle. Her face was pale, her usually perfect hair disheveled. She looked smaller than I remembered. The indictment charges Sterling with 10 counts of wire fraud and conspiracy, the reporter continued. If convicted, she faces up to 50 years in federal prison. I turned off the television and sat in the quiet of my kitchen. 29 years of getting up before sunrise, of perfecting beautiful pieces, of believing that loyalty mattered. It had mattered, just not the way I thought. Eleanor called back an hour later with more news. The EBEA had completed their investigation. 15 employees had been affected by the scheme. Total damages exceeded $1.5 million. Heritage Woodworks Board had voted to terminate Chloe and Thorne immediately and had agreed to full restitution for all affected employees. Your legacy bonus is fully restored, she said, backdated to when it should have vested, plus specialized tool allowance and additional compensation for damages. How much additional compensation? $150,000 plus your legal fees. I thought about Chloe telling me it was just business, nothing personal, just the way things worked. 3 months later, I was back in my personal workshop, carving a new rocking horse for my granddaughter. The tools felt good in my hands. The smell of fresh cedar and the sound of wood being shaped into something useful reminded me why I'd always been good at crafting. My legacy bonus payments had started right on schedule. The additional compensation sat in my savings account, earning interest. I hadn't touched it yet. Wasn't sure I needed to. After 29 years of steady work, I had everything I needed. Chloe had pleaded guilty to federal charges and been sentenced to 12 months in prison. Marcus Thorne got 4 months and 2 years of probation. Heritage Woodworks had been acquired by a larger design firm that cleaned house in the management ranks. The local Artisan Gazette had run a follow-up story about the case. Local artisans' complaint leads to federal investigation. They'd wanted to interview me, but I declined. I wasn't looking for attention or recognition. I just wanted what I'd earned. My daughter called while I was polishing the rocking horse. She'd seen the news story online and wanted to make sure I was doing okay. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she said, "for standing up for yourself." "I didn't do anything special," I told her. "Just made a phone call. Sometimes that's enough." I finished the rocking horse that afternoon and loaded it into my truck. My granddaughter had been asking for one for months, and I finally had the time to build it right. Solid maple, hand-painted details, the kind of thing that would last for generations. As I drove to her house, I thought about the difference between building something and just fixing what someone else had broken. Both had their place, both mattered, but building something new felt better.
You know that feeling? You've given years, maybe decades to a company.
Yeah.
You've helped it grow, mentored people. You hit those big career milestones. You were loyal.
Completely loyal.
And then maybe just as you're about to finally get the payoff, that big bonus or benefit that vests after so long, the rug gets pulled out.
It was pulled. What happens then? When that company loyalty, well, it feels like a one-way street.
It's a situation I think a lot of people worry about, and often it probably happens quietly, behind closed doors.
It does. But sometimes those doors get blown right open.
And that's exactly what we're digging into today. We have a really powerful story. Honestly, it's kind of shocking about one person's fight against what looks like corporate betrayal.
Right. Specifically, we're looking at some serious allegations, terminating long-term employees just before their benefits were set to fully vest.
And the sources for this deep dive, they give us a pretty unique view. We've got a detailed firsthand account from an artisan who went through this.
Plus internal company documents that seem to contradict the official story. We also have legal insights and a real look into the investigation itself.
So our mission today is to unpack this whole tangled mess, pull out the most critical details, try to understand how this alleged scheme was supposedly set up.
And maybe most importantly, figure out what lessons you can take away from it all.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So the central person in this story is Arthur Finch. The sources paint him as this really dedicated artisan, 62 years old. And when this all started, he'd put in 29 years and 9 months at a company called Heritage Woodworks.
29 years and 9 months, that's nearly 3 decades.
A lifetime almost.
He started there way back when he was 33. After a divorce, looking for stability, steady work, good benefits.
And the sources mentioned he was actually promised, care in his old age if he committed to the company long term.
And it sounds like he absolutely did commit. He wasn't just clocking in and out.
Not at all. He was integral. The sources really highlight this.
Yeah.
He saw Heritage Woodworks grow from just a small shop to 3 specialized locations.
Wow.
He'll bring in new tech, handled QA, and personally trained every single finishing apprentice hired after he started. His loyalty was active, contributing year after year.
It really sounds like the company was woven into his life, even more so after his wife passed away, maybe 7 years before this.
Yeah, that comes through strongly. The company health insurance was crucial for them. His manager gave him time off to grieve. Apparently half the office came to the funeral.
So you get the sense of a deep, real connection, a belief in the company's values, the promises they made.
Exactly. Which makes what happened next feel, well, particularly brutal based on his account.
The termination.
Yes.
And the timing. It happened just 3 weeks. 3 weeks before his full 30-year legacy bonus was supposed to vest.
3 weeks. And the sources describe the act itself as just chillingly impersonal.
He was let go by a manager named Chloe Sterling. She had an MBA, joined the company more recently, maybe the last couple of years.
That's right. And the accounts say she barely even looked at him. Just kept her eyes fixed on her tablet screen while delivering the news.
And the official reasons?
Oh, market trends. The company was moving in a digitally focused direction. His skills were suddenly obsolete. She just framed it as just business.
Just business after almost 30 years.
Everything was ready to go. Paperwork ready. He signed, handed over his keys, his company access fob.
And the source mentions the fob was worn smooth from decades of use.
Yeah, it's a small detail, isn't it? But it just hits home. That physical reminder of his long tenure just dismissed along with him.
But okay, here's where the story really takes a turn. That night, Arthur looks closer at the termination paperwork.
And he'd always kept meticulous records.
Yeah.
Pay stubs, memos, everything.
His math showed 29 years, 9 months.
Right. But the company paperwork, it listed his service as 29 years and 8 months.
Exactly 1 month short.
1 month short. The precise amount needed to disqualify him from that full 30-year legacy bonus.
Okay, that discrepancy is just huge. And he had the proof.
He had saved everything. Pay stubs, memos, policy updates, right back to day one. He confirmed his start date, April 10th, 1994. His records absolutely backed up his 29 years, 9 months calculation. No question.
So this raises that critical question. Was this just a typo? A simple clerical error? It happens.
It does happen. Or
whoa.
Was it something else? Something deliberate, maybe, to make sure he fell just short of that 30-year mark?
And then he remembered something else he'd saved, which turned out to be pretty important.
Extremely important. A recent company-wide memo from Chloe Sterling herself.
The same manager who fired him.
The very same. It was about updates to the Artisan's Guide, clarifying long-term incentives, and it specifically emphasized the need for accurate service calculations for employees approaching eligibility.
Oh, wow. Okay, so she just sent out a memo saying, get these dates right, especially for long-term people.
Exactly. Which makes his date being wrong by precisely 1 month, right after that memo, and landing him just shy of the bonus. Well, the simple error explanation starts to look pretty shaky, doesn't it?
It really does. It feels pointed.
At first, the sources say, Arthur thought about, just calling Chloe, trying to sort it out, or maybe getting a lawyer right away.
Sure, natural reactions, anger, confusion.
But after sitting with all his documentation, literally looking through 29 years of his working life laid out on his table, something shifted.
Okay.
He didn't just feel angry anymore. The source says he felt focused. He had the facts. Undeniable facts.
Seeing it all there, the proof of his time, his contribution, it solidified things.
It did. And that's when he decided to make a call to Eleanor Vance.
Okay, who's Eleanor Vance?
Eleanor was a former accountant at Heritage Woodworks, worked there for about a decade. But she'd left maybe a year before this all happened.
Why did she leave?
Specifically because she had ethical concerns about the new management team. The same team Chloe Sterling was part of.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah. She was known inside the company as a sharp woman, someone who always played by the book.
So calling her wasn't just asking for help. It was like a deliberate step, fighting back with someone who knew the company but wasn't part of the problem.
Exactly. Shifting from reacting to taking action.
And what did Eleanor say?
Well, her first reaction pretty much validated Arthur's suspicions. The source says she told him she'd heard about what happened.
Suggesting maybe things weren't quite right under the new management and people knew it.
It certainly seems that way. And she immediately offered some crucial legal insight.
Like what?
She told Arthur, look, terminating an employee specifically to stop them from collecting benefits they've earned, that's potentially illegal under federal law, ERISA specifically.
Okay.
But, she stressed, you absolutely have to prove intent, that it was done for that reason.
And that's where Arthur's records come in.
Bingo. She said his detailed records were essential, absolutely vital. The source even quotes her calling him a smart woman for keeping them. Apparently it was advice his late wife had given him years ago about documenting everything.
Wow. Good advice.
So Eleanor agrees to help. She goes through Arthur's 3 boxes of documents, pay stubs, policy manuals, internal memos. Everything.
Mm.
Meticulously.
And when she finds that memo from Chloe, the one about accurate calculations?
The source describes her reaction pretty vividly. She apparently said, "This is golden."
Golden. Why golden?
Because, Eleanor explained, that memo completely changed the game. With that memo emphasizing accuracy, the wrong calculation on Arthur's paperwork was now one of two things.
Okay.
Either it was a gross incompetence, or it was a deliberate lie.
Ah.
Incompetence might get Arthur his job back, maybe, but deliberately lying about service time to deny earned benefits, that's not just an HR issue. That crosses a line into serious legal territory, possibly fraud.
Which could trigger a federal investigation.
Precisely. So, armed with this potentially explosive evidence, Eleanor filed a formal complaint on Arthur's behalf with the Employee Benefits Enforcement Agency, the EBEA.
Okay, so now it's official. The complaint is filed.
Yes. And that definitely signaled to Heritage Woodworks that Arthur wasn't just going to fade away.
And how did the company react?
Well, according to the source, their first move was intimidation. Chloe Sterling called Arthur directly on his personal phone.
The manager who fired him, calling him at home.
Yep. She accused him of talking to people, suggesting he was planning something stupid. She doubled down, insisted they'd follow policy, falsely claiming his service was only 29 years and 8 months based on some interpretation of his hiring date.
An interpretation Arthur knew was wrong based on his record.
Correct. And then came the threat. She warned him if he filed what she called a frivolous complaint, they would scrutinize his entire work history, his reputation.
Basically, back off or we'll make your life miserable.
That was the clear message. But it was too late.
The complaint was already filed.
It was. And the very next day, Eleanor called Arthur with some surprising news. The EBA investigation into his case. It was moving forward incredibly fast.
Faster than expected. Why?
Well, here's a fascinating twist. Arthur wasn't the only one.
Oh.
It turns out the EBEA was already looking into Heritage Woodworks. Quietly, perhaps?
So Arthur's complaint landed on fertile ground.
Exactly. The investigator assigned to Arthur's case told Eleanor that 2 other long-term artisans, both also in their 60s, had been terminated in the past couple of years. Also, just months before, similar benefits were set to vest.
Let me guess, with mysteriously miscalculated service records.
You got it. The EBA saw a pattern. Their words.
A pattern? That sounds ominous.
It was. They characterized it as potential systematic benefit denial. This instantly elevated Arthur's personal grievance into something much, much bigger. A possible company-wide practice.
Wow. Okay, so the EBA is now really digging in.
They are. And the investigation quickly uncovered what the source calls the smoking gun evidence.
Smoking gun, what was it?
Emails. The EBA requested personnel files, digital records, and found a damning series of emails between Chloe Sterling and the company's new finance director, a guy named Marcus Thorne.
The manager who fired him and the finance guy, what were they emailing about?
Explicitly discussing strategies to, quote, optimize the workforce, and crucially, reduce long-term benefit obligations.
Reduce benefit obligations. They actually wrote that down.
They did. They specifically targeted older employees like Arthur, referring to them as a legacy cost.
A legacy cost? That's cold.
Isn't it? Arthur's potential bonus and his tool allowance were specifically singled out in these emails as a significant ongoing expense.
So they were talking about him by name, or his situation.
His situation, the costs associated with him vesting. And they planned, again, using their words, to eliminate his position and distribute his responsibilities among other, presumably cheaper, employees.
Eliminate his position. It sounds like clear planning, not just talk.
Absolutely. And investigators didn't stop there. They showed Arthur even more internal documents that seemed to confirm this whole alleged scheme.
More documents? Like what?
Communications debating the cost-effectiveness of older artisans versus younger ones, memos about renegotiating long-term incentive plans, and get this, a board presentation slide titled Legacy Employee Transition Strategy.
A transition strategy. That sounds like a euphemism for getting rid of them.
It certainly looks that way. And there was also a spreadsheet. It listed affected employees, including Arthur and those other 2 artisans, grouped under Q2 optimization targets.
Optimization targets. So it wasn't random. It was planned, presented internally as a calculated business strategy.
That's exactly what it looked like. And that level of documented, deliberate planning is precisely why this whole thing escalated beyond just a civil issue.
Right, because deliberately terminating employees to avoid paying benefits they've actually earned, that isn't just bad practice, it's fraud.
It is fraud. And because these plans were discussed and documented using email, electronic communications,
That potentially brings in federal charges like wire fraud.
Correct. The EAEA brought in someone from their criminal division. The stakes just got raised significantly. Arthur was told he might need to testify in federal court.
Wow. From a wrong date on a form to testifying in federal court.
It snowballed fast, and the investigation itself picked up serious momentum. The source describes it moving quicker than anyone really expected.
What happened?
Federal agents seized email servers from Heritage Woodworks. They executed search warrants on offices. They interviewed at least 5 current employees.
So a full-scale federal investigation.
Absolutely. And they found, as the source puts it, more evidence than they knew what to do with. Clear documentation of a systematic plan going back at least 2 years.
2 years of planning this.
Apparently. The logic, as detailed in the documents they found, was pretty brutal and simple.
Let me guess. Find people close to vesting for expensive benefits.
Find reasons, or maybe even create false ones, to question their value or their role.
And then terminate them just before the benefits kick in, saving the company millions.
That was the apparent plan. And Chloe Sterling, the manager, had actually pitched this to the board, framed it as a financial necessity, just basic business math, getting rid of the more expensive long-term employees.
Basic business math that ignored federal law.
Well, yes. It seems her business math didn't quite factor in the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, or the potential consequences of getting caught deliberately defrauding people out of benefits they'd worked decades to earn.
So the investigation goes public, the news is covering it, the company's stock price starts to tank. What happens next?
Chloe Sterling calls Arthur again, her second call to him.
Oh, and I bet her tone was different this time.
According to the source, very different.
Yeah.
Described as higher-pitched, nervous. She tried to backtrack completely.
How so?
Tried to frame the whole thing as just a big misunderstanding. Suddenly offered to review everything personally to make sure you get what you deserve.
A little late for that, wasn't it?
Far too late. Arthur refused to even engage with her. By this point, the horse was out of the barn. The EBA had already filed criminal charges.
Criminal charges against who?
Against Chloe Sterling and Marcus Thorne, the finance director. Wire fraud and conspiracy to defraud employees of earned benefits.
Wow. What kind of penalties were they facing?
The source notes Chloe was potentially facing up to 50 years in prison. Thorne, somewhat less, but still serious time. That basic business math suddenly had a very, very serious criminal calculation attached.
So criminal charges are filed. The company must be reeling.
Absolutely. And with the criminal case moving forward, the company's senior legal counsel tried a different tactic with Arthur. They reached out again.
Not Chloe this time, I assume.
No, this is their top lawyer, offering a civil settlement.
Okay, what was the offer?
$40,000 cash, plus his full legacy bonus and the tool allowance he was due, all in exchange for him agreeing to drop any further legal action against the company.
What did Eleanor's advisor say?
Her advice was immediate and firm. Don't take it.
Why not? It sounds like a decent offer on the surface.
Because Eleanor could see the company was panicking. They were scared. She told Arthur, with the investigation now public, more employees were bound to come forward. A class action lawsuit was almost inevitable.
And was she right?
Spot on. Very quickly, other Heritage Woodworks employees did start coming forward. First 6, then the number grew to 12. All alleging similar stories, fraudulent terminations, benefit calculation issues.
So Arthur's case opened the floodgates.
It really did. Local news jumped all over the story, highlighting the federal investigation. And Heritage Woodworks stock price, it just kept dropping significantly. The whole systematic plan was collapsing in public.
And then came the arrests, right?
Yes. And the source material describes a pretty dramatic scene. Chloe Sterling being physically led out of the Heritage Woodworks main building in handcuffs by federal agents.
Wow, perp walk and everything.
Right in front of reporters who were already there covering the story. That scene was caught on camera.
What were the details?
The reporter on scene detailed the charges. Again, wire fraud, conspiracy. Mentioned the hundreds of thousands of damages already identified, the potential prison sentences. Marcus Thorne, the finance director, was also charged and arrested around the same time.
So the just business approach ended with federal agents and handcuffs.
It certainly did. A very public, very personal consequence.
So what was the final outcome of the EBA investigation?
They concluded their findings. A total of 15 employees were confirmed to have been affected by this scheme, and the total damages amounted to over $1.5 million.
15 employees, over $1.5 million.
Yeah. Faced with that overwhelming evidence, the public scandal, the criminal charges against their top finance and operations people, the Heritage Woodworks Board acted fast.
What did they do?
They voted to fire Chloe Sterling and Marcus Thorne immediately, and they agreed to provide full restitution for all 15 affected employees.
Full restitution. So for Arthur, what did that mean specifically?
It meant he finally received his full 30-year legacy bonus, backdated to his termination date. He got his specialized tool allowance back, too, plus an additional $150,000 in compensation.
$150,000 on top. What was that for?
It covered his legal fees, emotional distress, punitive damages, essentially. He got everything he had earned, and then some. Justice, it seems, was served.
That's quite the resolution. And what about Arthur afterwards? How did he reflect on all this?
The sources describe him returning to his personal workshop, finding real joy again in his craft, in woodworking. He got the compensation money, but apparently realized after 29 years of steady work, he didn't immediately need it.
And the people responsible, Chloe and Marcus.
Chloe Sterling was eventually sentenced to 12 months in federal prison. Marcus Thorne got 4 months. Heritage Woodworks itself was acquired by another company not long after, and its management team was completely cleaned out.
Did Arthur talk about it much publicly?
No. Apparently, he declined all the media interview requests. His focus, he felt, was just on getting what was rightfully owed to him. The source mentions his daughter told him she was proud of him for standing up for yourself.
And his own take on it.
Very simple, very understated. He apparently just said he just made a phone call. Sometimes that's enough. He also reflected on the difference between, building something new with care, like he does with wood, versus just trying to fix something someone else broke. Found much more satisfaction in the creation.
That's a powerful perspective. This story, it really is more than just one guy fighting for his bonus, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a really stark case study. It shows that while corporations might operate under the logic of business math and optimization, there are actual laws, federal laws, designed specifically to protect people from deliberate fraud like this.
Arthur's incredible documentation, Eleanor's sharp legal mind, and the EBA's thorough investigation. They turn what the company tried to frame as simple business math into a very serious criminal calculation for the people behind it.
It really underscores how vital it is for everyone listening to be diligent in your own career. Keep records.
Arthur's meticulous habit, saving those pay stubs, those memos, those policy updates over decades, it wasn't just, being organized. It was the absolute foundation of his entire case.
Yeah. Those seemingly small pieces of paper or emails or digital files, they can become the crucial evidence you need to protect yourself and what you've earned.
So as you navigate your own career, maybe think about this story. Are there ever subtle signs that long-term employees are being viewed less as assets and more as, legacy costs to be managed or optimized away?
It's a tough question. What does genuine corporate loyalty even look like today? And how do you, as an individual, balance your dedication, your vulnerability in a job market that's constantly talking about efficiency, change, and the bottom line? Something to think about.